Well, Joel, whenever I come and get to speak on your campuses or your summer projects, like I said, I'm very impressed with your students. Well, a lot of times they're from a particular affinity group. As I'm talking with them, they're part of an athletic team, or they're part of a particular Greek chapter or some prominent affinity group. I remember I did a Valentine's banquet or something, and they had all the cheerleaders, the campus cheerleaders were there, and so it's like you're operating. You've identified all these different affinity groups on campus. And I think some of our listeners, some of those watching, listening, they just kind of view their campus as 18,000 students, and just any student that happens to come along, let's somehow target them. You guys seem to have operated, your staff and your student leaders kind of focus on certain affinity groups. And so tell us about that. Why do you focus on affinity groups, and how is it that the staff and student leaders should do that in an effective way?
Yeah, great question, Chad. And I think you're right. There's a lot of ways we can view the campuses. You can say, well, this is, how many students there are. This is the different majors, a lot of these different demographics, and I think there's a place for ministering to individuals.
Sure.
Obviously, even in my time with God this morning, I think it was Luke 5. Jesus spontaneously bumps into this leper, and then shortly
Mhm.
thereafter, there's this encounter with the paralytic. There's individual encounters that are throughout, the Gospels. And yet at the same time, you also see, and you see this with the disciples, a lot of times they come from pockets, they come from
Mm.
networks. There's this fishing community that Peter and Andrew and James and John, come out of. There's Bethsaida and Philip, who knows a couple of those guys. And then Jesus networks through him to Nathaniel, and there's this interconnectedness within these different communities that you see Jesus integrating within and ministering to. And a lot of the fruit of Jesus's ministry comes from those pockets, as
Mhm.
well as maybe particular, individuals that come along as well. And so we've just found that, yeah, of all the ways you could approach a campus, we want to be receptive and find those individuals and all, but we really are going to be intentional about identifying, and here's the communities that are here on campus. And those could be dorm floors, like you said, they could be athletic teams, they could be clubs, fraternities, sororities, even old high school, kind of clusters.
Yeah.
And what we found is if we can, build the trust and really integrate our own lives into those communities, now we're not just impacting individuals, but we can really bring the gospel into that network, of relationships. And inevitably, yeah, there's going to probably be particular individuals that come to Christ first, but now their friends and that whole community aren't just hearing the gospel message from, that student on their floor or that girl in their sorority, but they're seeing their life change, and they're beginning
Mhm.
to understand the gospel both from the laborer that's ministering there, but also from their friends who are beginning to come to
Mhm.
Christ. And
Mhm.
sometimes those closed communities can be harder to get into. Sometimes they can be intimidating. But what I found is, when you interact with those people, again, not trying to be one of them, but really trying to serve them, you show that you care. There can be a responsiveness, there can be an openness,
Oh yeah.
to us entering in, to that
Mhm.
team or to that house or to that floor, and really trying to serve them by helping them understand the Bible, grow in their faith. And what happens is when God gets a hold, of some of those men and women, a lot of times there's leaders, in those affinity groups, real influencers. God can leverage both the leadership that's intrinsically there and the network of relationships that's already been formed,
Yeah.
and it causes the gospel, to flow that
Mm.
much more rapidly and that much more
Mm.
effectively. Now I'd say this: with that comes greater persecution, because it is that closed system, it's that closed community. And so while a lot of their friend groups, will see this life change and be influenced by it for the positive, there can also be a lot of backlash, to that you don't experience with a particular individual, popping in and out from our
Mhm.
campus. So there's challenges that come with it, but it really is, I think, a great way to see the gospel flow. And by focusing in, on some of those leaders, some of those affinity groups, it really is the greatest and most effective way to see the gospel flow in permeate into all pockets, of campus,
Mhm.
and inevitably reach, more individuals by really beginning in those affinity groups.